The doctor opened the seals with great care, and there fell out the map of an island with latitude and longitude, soundings, names of hills and bays and inlets, and every particular that would be needed to bring a ship to a safe anchorage upon its shores. It was about 9 miles long and 5 across, shaped, you might say, like a fat dragon standing up, and had 2 fine landlocked harbors and a hill in the center part marked the Spyglass. And there were several additions of a later date, but above all, 3 crosses of red ink, 2 on the north part of the island, 1 in the southwest, and beside this last, in the same red ink, in a small, neat hand, very different from the captain's tawdry characters, these words, "Bulk of treasure here." Okay, now hold on a minute. Here we have this map with the treasure clearly marked, but we don't want it to get into the wrong hands, do we? So hey, if you think there might be any nasty pirates hanging around, you better make a decoy map, a fake map that will fool any nosy ne'er-do-wells. So let's trace this map, leaving off this 3rd cross and the words "bulk of treasure here," and hide the real one, okay? And while we're tracing this map, we'll learn some great geography terms. So first, let's gather along with this map some nice thin tracing paper or old parchment or vellum, something that will fool pirates, of course, and a pretty fine pointed black pen and a red pen. Now, the bottom of the map tells us that Jim Hawkins has struck out the latitude and longitude of the map. So we won't find that information here. Now, why is that? Well, it's because the latitude and longitudes make up the coordinates of any place on Earth. If you know a place's latitude and longitude, you can find it. And Jim wants the location of this island to remain a mystery forever after. As he says in the end of his story, oxen and wain ropes would not bring me back again to that accursed island, and he doesn't want anyone else to find it either. But what are exactly latitude and longitude? Do you know? Well, simply put, they're a system of lines used to describe the location of any place on Earth. Let's look at a different map so we can see them clearly. The Encyclopedia Britannica tells us that the lines of latitude run in an east-west direction across the Earth, and lines of longitude run in a north-south direction. Lines of latitude, also called parallels, circle the Earth parallel to the equator. The equator is an imaginary line that lies halfway between the North Pole and the South Pole. It runs east-west all the way around the Earth. Lines of latitude describe positions north and south of the equator. Lines of longitude run between the North Pole and the South Pole. And these lines are also called meridians. And like lines of latitude, meridians are measured in degrees, minutes, and seconds. The north-south line that marks 0 longitude passes right through Greenwich, England. Right here. This is called the Greenwich or prime meridian. Greenwich was chosen for the prime meridian because when the system of latitude and longitude was established, Great Britain was a world leader in exploration and map making, and Greenwich was the home of Britain's Royal Observatory. So, latitude and longitude together can describe the exact location of any place on Earth. So that's why Jim didn't want to keep them on the map. So before we get started on our map, let's tape down the map and the tracing paper with some masking tape, and then you can get started tracing. And as you trace, we'll talk about some of these great geographical terms and features of the map that will be very helpful for you to know, maybe even some things you've already started to wonder about. So go ahead and use your black pen and just start tracing the lines that you see underneath the tracing paper. Now, the thing about drawing maps, especially imaginary maps, is that they don't have to be exact. So you can put in as much detail as you want or as little detail as you want. You can make general squiggly lines, or you can try and follow real closely to what Robert Louis Stevenson did. Now, this is interesting that this map was actually drawn by him, and it inspired the whole story of Treasure Island. He actually drew the map first, and the story came out of the map. And it was later lost by his publisher, and he had to draw a new one, he said, which was a lot harder. It was a lot harder to draw a map to match the story than a story to match the map. So first of all, what are soundings? Those little numbers that you see on the map represent measurements called soundings that refer to the depth of a body of water. And they're taken with, guess what? A sounding line. So that's what those little numbers are about. So what about harbor? You probably already know that a harbor is a place of protection for ships and vessels along the coastline. Vessels can be unloaded, and sometimes it's called a port. Well, a landlocked harbor, then, is a harbor that's almost surrounded by land. It just has a little entry for the vessels to pass through this single channel and enter the sea. And of course, it's ideal because it's more protected. And you can see why pirates and sailors and treasure hunters would like a landlocked harbor. San Francisco Bay is the world's largest landlocked harbor. Now, look at your map. Do you see the landlocked harbors and why they would be helpful to pirates and sailors and treasure seekers? Well, how about a cove and a cape? What's the difference between a cove and a cape? A cove is a type of small sheltered bay, so it's the scoop out of the coastline of an ocean or a lake or a river. And sometimes there's smaller inlets of larger bays or lagoons. That's a cove. Now, a cape is kind of the opposite. It's a high point of land that extends into a river or a lake or an ocean. So a cape goes out into the water and a cove goes into the land. And on our map, we see a cape of Ye Woods, and we see a cove called something. Rosal Cove? We're not sure. Some of Robert Louis Stevenson's letters are not super easy to read. But we have good examples of capes and coves on this map. Now there's a hill on this map called Foremast Hill. What is a foremast and why name a hill after one? Well, a foremast is on a ship, as you might have guessed. A mast is a tall pole that supports a sail, and the foremast is nearest the front of the ship. So, think about why you think Robert Louis Stevenson might have named a hill for a foremast. Is that a hill that you stand on and see the foremast of the ship coming toward you? Is it shaped like a foremast? Is it in the front of the island? What do you think? Well, how about mizzenmast hill? Now, a mizzenmast or a mizzenmast is typically the third mast in a three-masted ship, which is aft, that is, at the back of the ship. It's the opposite of a foremast. Again, why do you think a hill on an island would be named after the mast at the very back of a ship? Now, at the southernmost part of the island, we see Haulbowline Head. Now, a head is a part of an island that projects out, sort of like a peninsula. And Haulbowline is actually an island off the coast of Ireland, where the world's first yacht club was founded in 1720. Do you think that Robert Louis Stevenson had this in his mind when he named Haulbowline Head? Interestingly, the name Haulbowline also means a place where there are conger eels. Do you think maybe there are eels around that part of the island? Now, there's a place on this island where there's a warning, and it says foul ground. You can tell by the words that are used that that's not a place you want to hang out in a ship, right? But to be more precise, according to the National Hydrographic Organization, foul ground is an area over which it is safe to navigate, but which should be avoided for anchoring, taking the ground, or ground fishing. So be careful around foul ground. Now, the compass rose of any map is sometimes called a wind rose, or rose of the winds, or compass star. And it's a figure that's used to display the orientation of the cardinal directions. That's north, east, south, and west. So on our map here, we see an arrow at the top of the compass rose, and that tells us which direction is north. And thus we know what all the other directions are as well. Now you might want to include all the fancy writing on this map, but it's a little bit hard to read. So you might even include your own terms and warnings. After all, we are trying to throw off the pirates. So there might be some good reason for slipping in some things that are a little bit confusing, don't you think? And now that you've finished, tell yourself, well done. Fold up your decoy map and maybe put it right back where you found it, in case some pirate comes along. But whatever you do, be sure to guard that real map very, very carefully. You might even want to fold it up, put it in your pocket, and just don't let it out of your sight.